one. This idea of how much time before Shabbos could you add, right? Once we've established that you can add time, how much time can you add? The answer is very simple, very straightforward. Says the Rosh, which is different from what you're referring to in the previous part, right? This is at the bottom of page 4 in the Hebrew, at least. In the in the previous section over here, we were asking how much time before should you add. Here's a question of how much may you add, right? The answer is from Plag Hamincha. This is accepted by everyone. Shulchan Aruch, Mishnah Berurah say Plag Hamincha. Just in one word, what is Plag Hamincha? Plag Hamincha is half the time between the time that mincha, that Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim was brought in the Mikdash and Shkia. That means effectively 75 zmani minutes before Shkia. You divide the day into 12 parts. That means that the summer days will be very, very long. The winter days will be shorter because you divide the daylight hours into 12 parts, and you multiply that by 1 1/4. That 1 1/4 hours before Shkia, that's Plag Hamincha. And that's from that time you may add time to Shabbat. Now people get this whole story a bit wrong. I'll refer you to the next series. The next series refers to Hilchot Tefillah. Soon we'll finish Hilchot Shabbat. We'll move on to Hilchot Tefillah. And there in Unit 5, we talk about the issue of when are the times of Mincha and Ma'ariv. The proper times to daven Mincha and Ma'ariv, Unit number 5. I'll say something simplistic now. It's not the full picture. You get the full picture there. You can get a slightly fuller picture in the Archavot. The fullest picture that I'm offering is in Unit 5 of the next series, but I'll give something very simplistic right now. The simple thing referring to on a daily basis. A person needs to decide when is his cutoff line between Mincha and Ma'ariv. Is the cutoff line between Mincha and Ma'ariv Shkia and Tzedek Chavim? So Mincha should be before Shkia and Ma'ariv is after Tzedek Chavim. Or should the cutoff line between Mincha and Ma'ariv be Plag Hamincha? Why? Because effectively in the Mikdash, Plag Hamincha was the cutoff line between day and night. In the Mikdash, the cutoff line between day and night was effectively Plag Hamincha for most intents and purposes, as opposed to I'd say most of Halacha, the cutoff line is at Tzedek Chavim, Shkia and Tzedek Chavim. Not going to go into that till finish my short issue, but therefore you need to decide which one are you adhering to. Are you sticking to the one in the Mikdash, which are Plag Hamincha? Are you sticking to the one that's for other intents and purposes in the world, and therefore in the rest of Halacha? Therefore, if you want to have Shabbos early, what you'd want to do is daven Mincha before Plag, and then you could daven Ma'ariv anytime after Plag. Now, in all honesty, you don't have to do that in several senses. First of all, just because you davened Mincha before Plag doesn't mean you have to make Kabel Shabbat at Plag. It means you can make Kabel Shabbat anytime after Plag, up to but before Shkia. It also doesn't mean you have to daven Ma'ariv after Plag. This is something that I proposed to people. I told people when people were not going to shul during the Corona times, when they weren't davening with the minyan anyway, I told them if you want to do early Shabbat, the preferable way of doing early Shabbat should be as follows. Daven Mincha whenever in the afternoon before Plag, or after Plag, doesn't really matter. Do Kabbalat Shabbat whenever you want after Plag. Daven Ma'ariv after Tzedek Chavim. You can have your Suda between. I did this several times in the summer when there was no minyan anyway. So we daven Mincha. I daven Mincha whenever, early in the afternoon. Plag, I gathered the kids around. We said Kabbalat Shabbat, made Kiddush, Hamotzi, had the Suda, and then daven Ma'ariv when you finish the Suda. Now you have trouble if you don't have a Suda before Ma'ariv. That's an issue in itself, but it's not the issue here. Right? What I just want to, what's important for me is that people have this misconception. They say we go to early Shabbat, right? To an early Shabbos minyan. That means that at Plag Hamincha it becomes Shabbos. Wrong. Doesn't work like that. You need to finish mincha before Plag Hamincha, because then otherwise you won't be able to daven Ma'ariv before Shkia. That's the problem. In terms of Kabbalat Shabbat, you're Kabbalat Shabbat, you're Kabbalat Shabbat. It could be by saying Boy Kala, it could be by saying Mizmor Shleim Shabbat. We'll learn all these things later on. But there's no relationship between the two. When we lived in Alon Shvut, and I wanted to go to the Sikha in the Yeshiva Leil Shabbat in the summer, but it wasn't very easy for the family for me to go to have the Sikha in the Yeshiva, and the Yeshiva finished davening late. So what I did several times was exactly this. I daven mincha early, make Kiddush, say Kabbalat Shabbat at Plag, make Kiddush, have a Suda. We had very little kids then, so the Suda wasn't very long, wasn't very easy. And then finish the Suda, go up to the Yeshiva and hear the Sikha and daven Ma'ariv. So what's important to me is just to understand that Plag here has two very different roles. That's what I'm trying to impress. By giving all these examples, what I'm trying to impress a very simple point, which is Plag means two totally different things here. One is from Plag onwards, you could Mekabel Shabbat whenever you want. You could daven mincha in the early Shabbos minyan, and then decide that you're not going to Mekabel Shabbat until an hour later. After mincha, go home. Continue getting ready for Shabbat. Say Kabbalat Shabbat, start the Seudah. Then go to the Shul's Ma'ariv, the late Ma'ariv. That's fine. Again, I'm not referring to a different question, which is, could you make the Seudah before Ma'ariv in certain circumstances? I'm not asking that question at the moment. But my point is, at Plag, you have to decide, have you davened Mincha already, and then you can daven Ma'ariv from then on? That's one question. A different question is, Plag is the point from which you can make Shabbat whenever you want. It could be, you could have mincha at 1:30 in the afternoon, make Shabbat at Shkia. So whatever. 10 minutes before Shkia. Any of those options is fine. It's important to just be aware of the two different aspects of Plag, the two different roles that Plag has in this context. So that's just what I want to say about that.